Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
The imposing granite facade of the courthouse loomed before Ethan Sawyer as he climbed the worn steps, each one feeling heavier than the last. At 38 years old, the public defender had spent his career fighting for justice, his integrity a beacon in the often murky waters of the legal system. Now, in a cruel twist of fate, he found himself on the other side of the courtroom, facing charges that threatened to destroy everything he had built. As Ethan pushed through the heavy oak doors, the hushed whispers of the gathered crowd washed over him. Familiar faces, colleagues and journalists alike, watched his every move, their expressions a mix of curiosity, disbelief, and, in some cases, poorly concealed satisfaction. He kept his head high, jaw clenched, as he made his way to the defense table. The irony of his position was not lost on him. How many times had he stood in this very courtroom, defending clients against seemingly insurmountable odds? But this time, the stakes were far more personal. The bailiff's voice rang out, calling the court to order. All rise for the Honorable Judge Harold Johnson. A hush fell over the room as Judge Johnson entered, his stern countenance preceding him like a storm front. At 60 years old, the judge had a reputation for harsh sentences and little patience for what he perceived as corruption within the system. As he took his seat, his gaze fell upon Ethan, and the public defender felt a chill run down his spine. There was no mistaking the disdain in those steel-gray eyes. "Be seated," Judge Johnson intoned, his voice as cold and unyielding as the law itself. "We are here today in the case of the state versus Ethan Sawyer on charges of evidence tampering in the matter of People versus Richardson. Mr. Reeves, you may call your first witness." Daniel Reeves, the prosecuting attorney, rose from his seat with the fluid grace of a predator. At 40 years old, he cut an impressive figure in his tailored suit, his charismatic presence filling the courtroom. "Thank you, Your Honor." The state calls Vanessa Sawyer to the stand. Ethan's heart clenched as his wife of 10 years stood and made her way to the witness box. Vanessa, 35, moved with the poise of someone accustomed to being in front of cameras, her career as a local news reporter evident in every measured step. As she raised her right hand to be sworn in, Ethan searched her face for any sign of the woman he had loved, any hint of doubt or remorse. But Vanessa's expression remained impassive, her green eyes never once meeting his. "Mrs. Sawyer," Reeves began, his voice smooth as silk, "can you please tell the court about the events leading up to your discovery of your husband's alleged misconduct?" Vanessa's voice was steady as she recounted a tale that seemed to Ethan like a nightmare from which he could not wake. She spoke of late nights, hushed phone calls, and a growing suspicion that something was not right. "I noticed Ethan becoming increasingly secretive," she testified. "He was spending more and more time at the office, even on weekends. When I asked him about it, he would brush me off, saying it was just a difficult case." Reeves nodded sympathetically, playing to the jury. "And what led you to believe that there was more to it than just a difficult case?" "It was the way he acted when he was home," Vanessa continued. "He was distracted, jumpy. One night, I woke up and found him on his laptop in the middle of the night. When I approached, he slammed it shut and got defensive. That is when I knew something was wrong." As Vanessa spoke, Ethan felt a growing sense of unreality. The events she described were twisted versions of the truth, moments taken out of context and woven into a damning narrative. Yes, he had been working late, but it was to prepare for the Richardson case, one of the most challenging of his career. The laptop incident had been nothing more than his attempt to surprise Vanessa with anniversary plans. Reeves approached the bench, holding a stack of papers. "Your Honor, I would like to enter into evidence exhibits A through C, emails and text messages recovered from the defendant's devices." Ethan leaned forward, straining to see the documents as they were handed to Judge Johnson. His blood ran cold as he recognized snippets of conversations, innocuous exchanges with colleagues, now presented as sinister plots. "Mrs. Sawyer," Reeves continued, "can you read for the court the highlighted portion of this email dated March 15th? Vanessa's voice faltered for the first time as she read aloud. "We need to make sure this evidence never sees the light of day. I will take care of it on my end. You just need to keep Richardson quiet." Ethan's mind raced. He remembered that email. It had been about protecting a witness from intimidation, ensuring that crucial testimony would not be suppressed. But taken out of context, it painted a damning picture. As the questioning continued, Ethan found himself scrutinizing every facial expression, every subtle gesture between Vanessa and Reeves. There was something off about their interactions, a familiarity that went beyond the professional relationship between a witness and prosecutor. He caught a fleeting glance between them, a look that spoke volumes in its brevity. When it came time for cross-examination, Ethan's court-appointed attorney did his best to poke holes in Vanessa's testimony. But with each question, it became clear that the case against Ethan had been meticulously constructed. Every alibi he offered was countered, every explanation undermined by the mountain of circumstantial evidence. As the day wore on, character witnesses were called, colleagues who spoke of Ethan's dedication to justice, clients whose lives he had changed for the better. But their words seemed to fall on deaf ears. Judge Johnson's expression remained impassive, his occasional glances at Ethan filled with barely concealed contempt. The final blow came when Ethan took the stand in his own defense. As he recounted his version of events, he could feel the jury's skepticism. The prosecution had painted him as a master manipulator, and now every word out of his mouth was viewed through that lens. When the jury returned with their verdict, Ethan stood on shaky legs, his heart pounding in his ears. The foreman's words hit him like a physical blow. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Ethan Sawyer, guilty of evidence tampering." The courtroom erupted in a wave of gasps and murmurs. Ethan's vision blurred, the faces around him becoming a sea of indistinct shapes. He barely registered Judge Johnson's voice cutting through the chaos. "Order. Order in the court." The gavel's sharp crack brought a sudden silence. Judge Johnson's eyes bored into Ethan as he delivered his sentence. "Mr. Sawyer, you betrayed not only the trust of your clients but the very foundations of our justice system. It is the decision of this court that you be sentenced to 5 years in Oakville Correctional Facility." The judge's words dripped with disdain as he continued. "Let this serve as an example to all those who would abuse their position and corrupt the pursuit of justice. This court is adjourned." As the bailiff approached to take him into custody, Ethan's gaze found Vanessa one last time. For a moment, he thought he saw a flicker of regret in her eyes. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by a cold determination. In that moment, Ethan knew with certainty that his fight was far from over. As the cold steel of handcuffs closed around his wrists, a single thought crystallized in his mind. He would find the truth, no matter the cost. If you were interested. Despite himself, Ethan felt a spark of curiosity. He had noticed Marcus spending time in the prison's outdated computer lab, part of a supposed rehabilitation program. Tech lessons? What exactly are you offering? Marcus glanced down the corridor before lowering his voice. "Let's just say I have skills that might come in handy for a man in your position. Coding, network penetration, digital forensics. The kind of stuff that could shed some light on your situation." Ethan's heart rate quickened. The idea of having tools to investigate his own case was tempting. But the risk. "I appreciate the offer, Marcus, but I cannot afford to get into any more trouble." Marcus's expression turned serious. "Look, Ethan, I have been watching you. You do not belong here, and we both know it. I am offering you a chance to fight back, to uncover the truth. But it is your choice." As Marcus turned to leave, Ethan found himself calling out, "Wait." He took a deep breath, weighing his options. The path of least resistance would be to serve his time quietly. But the injustice of his situation burned within him. "Okay," he said finally. "I am in." Over the next few months, Ethan threw himself into his clandestine education with Marcus. Under the guise of participating in the prison's computer literacy program, he absorbed everything Marcus had to offer. Late at night, when the other inmates were asleep, Marcus would whisper advanced coding techniques, explaining how to navigate firewalls and exploit system vulnerabilities. Ethan's legal mind, once focused on the intricacies of case law, now grappled with the complexities of programming languages and network architectures. He found an unexpected solace in the logical progression of code, a stark contrast to the chaotic injustice that had upended his life. As his skills grew, so did his hope. For the first time since his conviction, Ethan felt a sense of purpose, a glimmer of control over his fate. But it was not until a letter arrived from an unexpected source that the pieces truly began to fall into place. The envelope bore the shaky handwriting of Mrs. Gladwell, his 75-year-old neighbor. Ethan had always had a soft spot for the elderly widow, often helping her with odd jobs around her house. As he unfolded the letter, his eyes widened at its contents. "Dear Ethan, I hope this letter finds you well, given the circumstances. I wanted to express my condolences for your situation. I never believed for a moment that you could be guilty of such things. I feel compelled to share something that has been troubling me. In the weeks before your arrest, I noticed some unusual activity at your house while you were working late. There were visitors, a man and a woman, who would arrive after dark and leave before dawn. I did not think much of it at the time, but given what has happened, I cannot help but wonder if it might be important. Please take care of yourself, and know that you are in my thoughts. Sincerely, Margaret Gladwell. Ethan read the letter multiple times, his mind racing. Visitors to his house when he was not there. A man and a woman. The implications were staggering. Could Vanessa have been meeting someone behind his back? And if so, how did it connect to his case? With renewed determination, Ethan approached Marcus the next day. I need to get into the prison's computer system, he said without preamble. I think I might have a lead on what really happened, but I need access to investigate. Marcus raised an eyebrow, a slow smile spreading across his face. Well, counselor. Looks like you are ready for your final exam. Let's see what you have learned. That night, under the cover of darkness, Ethan put his newly acquired skills to the test. His fingers flew over the keyboard in the dimly lit computer lab, bypassing security protocols and delving into the prison's outdated network. With each layer of security he penetrated, his confidence grew. Finally, he gained access to the prison's external connection. Heart pounding, Ethan began his investigation in earnest. He combed through public records, court documents, and news archives, searching for any connection between Vanessa, Daniel Reeves, and Judge Johnson. As the first rays of dawn crept through the barred windows, Ethan sat back, his mind reeling from what he had uncovered. Irregularities in the evidence presented against him, inconsistencies in testimonies, and hints of a deeper conspiracy began to take shape. The road ahead would be dangerous and uncertain. But for the first time since his conviction, Ethan felt a surge of hope. He turned to Marcus, who had been keeping watch. I think I found something, Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. But I am going to need more time. More access. Marcus nodded, his expression hard. Then I guess it is time we start planning your great escape, my friend. Because once you go down this rabbit hole, there is no turning back. As they began to discuss the logistics of what would undoubtedly be a risky and elaborate plan, Ethan felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. He was no longer just a wrongfully convicted man serving time. He was a man on a mission to uncover the truth and reclaim his life, no matter the cost. The following weeks were a flurry of covert activity as Ethan and Marcus meticulously crafted their escape plan. The computer lab became their war room, each late-night session bringing them closer to their goal. Ethan's legal mind, now honed by his newfound technical skills, worked in perfect synergy with Marcus's expertise. Their plan hinged on exploiting a vulnerability in the prison's security system during a scheduled upgrade. It was a small window of opportunity, but it was all they needed. As they worked, Ethan continued his digital investigation, each new piece of evidence fueling his determination. One night, as the prison settled into its uneasy quiet, Ethan made a breakthrough that left him reeling. Buried deep in a tangle of encrypted emails was proof of a long-standing affair between Vanessa and Daniel Reeves. The timestamps on the messages predated Ethan's arrest by months, painting a picture of betrayal that went far beyond what he had imagined. Marcus, Ethan called softly, his voice tight with emotion. You need to see this. As Marcus leaned in to read the screen, Ethan felt a mix of vindication and heartbreak. The woman he had loved, the life they had built together, it had all been a lie. But the revelation also provided a motive, a reason for the elaborate setup that had landed him in prison. Well, I will be damned, Marcus muttered, shaking his head. Your wife and the prosecutor? That is one hell of a conflict of interest. Ethan nodded slowly. And it is just the tip of the iceberg. Look at this. He pulled up another window displaying a series of financial records, large deposits into an offshore account belonging to Judge Johnson. The transactions coincided with some of his most controversial verdicts, including Ethan's. Marcus let out a low whistle. You have stumbled onto something big here, my friend. The kind of thing that gets people killed. Or the kind of thing that sets an innocent man free, Ethan countered, a newfound fire in his eyes. We need to move fast. Our window of opportunity is approaching. Marcus nodded, his expression a mix of excitement and concern. All right. Let's go over the plan one more time. We cannot afford any mistakes. As the date of the scheduled system upgrade drew near, tension mounted. Ethan spent his days going through the motions of prison life, all while his mind raced with anticipation and fear. He knew that if caught, he would face even more severe consequences. But the alternative, spending years behind bars for a crime he did not commit while the real culprits went free, was unthinkable. The night before the escape, Ethan lay awake in his bunk, staring at the ceiling. His thoughts drifted to the life he had left behind, his career, his home, the people he thought he could trust. The anger and betrayal he felt toward Vanessa and Daniel Reeves burned hot in his chest, fueling his resolve. As the first light of dawn broke through the small window of his cell, Ethan took a deep breath. Today was the day. The guard at the door glanced up, distracted by the commotion. "Hell of a time for a system upgrade," Ethan said, pitching his voice low and gruff. The guard nodded, barely giving him a second look as he buzzed him through. "Tell me about it. Be careful out there." And just like that, Ethan was outside. The cool evening air hit his face, and for a moment, he was paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of what he had just done. But he could not afford to hesitate. Sticking to the shadows, he made his way to the predetermined spot where Marcus had arranged for a car to be waiting. As he drove away from Oakville Correctional Facility, Ethan's mind raced with the tasks ahead. He needed to find a safe place to lay low, gather more evidence, and somehow bring the truth to light without getting caught. But beneath the anxiety and uncertainty, there was a glimmer of hope. He was free, and he had the skills and knowledge to clear his name. Ethan thought of the evidence he had left behind for Marcus to anonymously submit to the authorities. It was not much, but it was a start. The first domino in what he hoped would be the collapse of the corruption that had stolen his life. As the prison faded from view in his rearview mirror, Ethan allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Vanessa, Daniel, Judge Johnson. They thought they had beaten him, broken him, but they had no idea what was coming. The game had changed, and Ethan Sawyer was playing to win. The first rays of dawn crept through the threadbare curtains of a small, nondescript apartment in the heart of a bustling city. Ethan Sawyer, once a respected public defender, now a fugitive from justice, stirred from a restless sleep. His hand instinctively moved to his face, fingers tracing the contours of the thick beard that had become both his disguise and his armor against the world. Gone was the clean-shaven, suit-wearing lawyer. In his place stood Alex Green, a freelance IT consultant with a penchant for keeping to himself. Ethan had spent weeks cultivating this new identity, meticulously crafting a backstory that would withstand scrutiny. The forged documents scattered across his makeshift desk were a testament to his newfound skills, courtesy of his time with Marcus in Oakville Correctional. As he moved about the cramped space, preparing a cup of instant coffee, Ethan's mind whirred with plans and contingencies. He was acutely aware that every moment of freedom was borrowed time. The authorities would be hunting for him, and he could not afford to make a single mistake. His gaze fell upon the laptop humming quietly in the corner, his lifeline and his weapon in this fight to reclaim his life. With a deep breath, Ethan settled in front of the screen, ready to dive back into the digital realm where he now felt most at home. Across town, in a modest office building, Sarah Chin sat at her desk, her fingers hovering hesitantly over her keyboard. The young paralegal had always prided herself on her integrity, on her belief in the system she served. But the events of the past year had shaken that faith to its core. The ping of an incoming email jolted her from her reverie. Her heart raced as she saw the sender, an encrypted address she knew belonged to Ethan. Despite the risks, despite everything she stood to lose, Sarah had agreed to help her former boss clear his name. She believed in his innocence with a conviction that surprised even her. As she read Ethan's latest message detailing his plans to hack into Vanessa and Daniel's accounts, Sarah felt a mix of exhilaration and fear. This was more than just bending the rules. It was diving headfirst into a world of cyber espionage and vigilante justice. But as she recalled the day of Ethan's sentencing, the look of bewildered betrayal on his face as his own wife testified against him, Sarah knew she could not turn back now. With trembling fingers, she typed out a response. "I'm in. What do you need me to do?" Miles away, in a sleek high-rise apartment, Vanessa Sawyer stood before a full-length mirror, adjusting her blazer with practiced precision. Her reflection showed a woman at the height of her career, poised, confident, successful. But beneath the polished exterior, a storm of emotions raged. She thought of Ethan, locked away in prison, and felt a twinge of what? Guilt? Regret? She pushed the feelings aside, focusing instead on the life she was building with Daniel. They were planning to sell Ethan's family home, their home, and move in together. It was a fresh start, a chance to leave the mess of the trial behind them. As she applied a final touch of lipstick, Vanessa's phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Love you." A smile played at her lips, but it did not quite reach her eyes. Success had come at a price, and sometimes, in the quiet moments before dawn, she wondered if it had been worth it. Ethan's fingers flew across the keyboard, his eyes darting across lines of code as he methodically worked his way through layers of digital security. Hacking into Vanessa and Daniel's personal and professional accounts was a delicate operation, one that required patience and precision. But with each password cracked, each firewall bypassed, a clearer picture of their deceit and manipulation emerged. Email threads revealed the depth of their affair, stretching back months before Ethan's arrest. Financial records hinted at unexplained cash flows, suggesting a level of corruption that went far beyond what Ethan had imagined. With each new piece of evidence, his resolve strengthened. This was no longer just about clearing his name. It was about exposing the rot that ran deep within the justice system he had once served. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Ethan paused in his work, rubbing his tired eyes. He needed to be careful to cover his tracks, but he also needed to get this information out there, to someone who could use it to start asking the right questions. His thoughts turned to Melissa Kong, an investigative journalist known for her tenacity and her willingness to take on powerful figures. With careful anonymity, Ethan began crafting an email, laying out the breadcrumbs that would lead her to Judge Johnson's suspicious financial activities. It was a risk, but a calculated one. If Melissa took the bait, it could be the first domino to fall in bringing down the corrupt alliance that had destroyed his life. As Ethan hit send, he leaned back in his chair, a smile playing at his lips. The storm was gathering, and soon, very soon, it would break over the heads of those who thought they had beaten him. They had no idea what was coming. Across the city, in a lavish penthouse, Daniel Reeves poured himself a generous glass of scotch, savoring the burn as he swallowed. He looked out over the skyline, feeling on top of the world. The Sawyer case had been a masterstroke. Not only had they removed a potential threat, but Ethan's conviction had cemented Daniel's reputation as a prosecutor who could take down anyone. As he sipped his drink, his phone buzzed with a message from Vanessa. "Just put the house on the market. End of an era." He smirked, thinking of how easy it had all been. Vanessa had played her part perfectly, and now they were reaping the rewards. But as he moved to reply, a notification from his bank app caught his eye. A large transfer had just been processed, money moving from one of his private accounts to an offshore holding. Daniel frowned. He had not authorized that. As he began to investigate, a seed of unease took root in his mind. Something was not right. Little did Daniel know, the first cracks were beginning to appear in the foundation of the life he had so carefully constructed. The storm was coming, and none of them were prepared for the devastation it would bring. That Daniel was embezzling funds from his high-profile clients, bank statements were altered, emails fabricated, all pointing to a pattern of financial misconduct that would be impossible to ignore once brought to light. As Ethan worked, he could not help but reflect on the irony of the situation. He, who had always prided himself on his integrity, was now using every underhanded tactic in the book. But the image of his wife on the witness stand, coolly lying to send him to prison, hardened his resolve. This was war, and in war, there were no rules. Meanwhile, Vanessa Sawyer was facing battles of her own. The initial euphoria of her new life with Daniel had begun to fade, replaced by a gnawing sense of unease. Daniel's late nights at the office, his distracted manner, the secret of phone calls, it all added up to a picture she did not want to acknowledge. Pacing in their new home, the one they had bought with the proceeds from selling her life with Ethan, Vanessa made a decision. With trembling hands, she picked up her phone and dialed a number she never thought she would need. Barrett Investigations. "Yes," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. "I would like to hire a private investigator." The irony of using money from Ethan's house to investigate her new partner was not lost on her. But Vanessa had come too far, sacrificed too much, to let everything fall apart now. As she hung up the phone, Vanessa caught sight of her reflection in the window. For a moment, she hardly recognized the woman staring back at her. What had she become? The thought was fleeting, pushed aside by a steely determination. She had made her choices, and now she would see them through, no matter the cost. Ethan's plan reached its crescendo on a rainy Tuesday evening. With surgical precision, he unleashed a digital tsunami. Proof of Daniel's infidelity with Claire was sent simultaneously to Vanessa and Daniel's unsuspecting wife. Financial records showing discrepancies were anonymously emailed to Daniel's law partners. And an encrypted file containing the most damning evidence was delivered to Melissa Kong, the investigative journalist who had been digging into Judge Johnson's finances. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Daniel's carefully constructed world began to crumble around him. His wife's furious confrontation, his partner's suspicious inquiries, and Vanessa's cold fury all hit him at once. The pressure was unbearable, and Daniel felt himself beginning to crack. In a moment of panic, Daniel lashed out at Vanessa, accusing her of setting him up. Their argument, fueled by fear and betrayal, escalated quickly. Harsh words turned to shoves, and soon their pristine new home echoed with the sounds of shattering glass and furious accusations. As neighbors called the police, drawn by the commotion, Ethan watched from afar through hijacked security cameras. He felt no joy in the scene unfolding before him, only a sense of justice being served. The storm he had set in motion was now a hurricane, and it was only a matter of time before it swept away everything in its path. In the aftermath of the argument, as police lights flickered outside their window, Vanessa and Daniel sat in stunned silence, the realization dawning that the alliance they had forged in deceit was now irreparably fractured. The seeds of doubt Ethan had so carefully planted had taken root, and now they threatened to choke the very foundation of their relationship. As the night wore on, Ethan allowed himself a moment of reflection. The game had changed. The players were in disarray, but the final act was yet to come. He thought of Sarah, working tirelessly behind the scenes to help him. He thought of Marcus, still in prison, who had given him the tools to fight back. And he thought of the justice system he had once believed in so deeply. With renewed determination, Ethan turned back to his computer. The honey trap had served its purpose, but it was just one piece of a larger puzzle. As the first light of dawn broke over the city, Ethan began to plan his next move. A courtroom showdown that would shake the very pillars of justice. The courthouse buzzed with electric tension, reporters and spectators alike jostling for position as they awaited the start of what promised to be a sensational trial. At the center of the storm was Judge Harold Johnson, a man whose very presence once commanded respect and fear in equal measure. But today, as he made his way through the throng, his steps lacked their usual confident stride. Melissa Kong's expose on the judge's corruption had hit like a bombshell, sending shockwaves through the legal community and beyond. Calls for reviews of his past cases echoed through the halls of justice, and the pressure was mounting with each passing hour. As Judge Johnson took his place at the bench, his eyes darted nervously around the packed courtroom, as if searching for unseen enemies in every shadow. Unbeknownst to him, one such enemy was closer than he could have imagined. Ethan Sawyer, his beard now neatly trimmed and his hair dyed a nondescript brown, sat among the sea of faces in the gallery. His disguise as a court clerk was flawless, right down to the ID badge that hung around his neck, a testament to the skills he had honed during his time on the run. As the proceedings began, Ethan watched Judge Johnson closely, noting every bead of sweat, every trembling hand. The once imposing figure now seemed small, diminished by the weight of his own corruption. Ethan felt a mix of emotions. Satisfaction at seeing the man who had sentenced him brought low, but also a deep sadness for the system he had once believed in so fervently. Throughout the morning, Ethan orchestrated a series of subtle disturbances designed to further unsettle the already rattled judge, a whispered conversation just within earshot, speaking of offshore accounts and federal investigations. Meaningful glances exchanged between planted actors in the gallery. Each small action was like a pebble dropped in a pond, sending ripples of paranoia through Judge Johnson's fragile composure. As the judge called for a recess, his voice noticeably strained, Ethan allowed himself a small smile. The plan was working perfectly, but the real fireworks were yet to come. The afternoon session brought an unexpected development. Vanessa Sawyer, her usual poise marred by dark circles under her eyes and a barely concealed nervousness, entered the courtroom. She was there to support Daniel, whose own career was hanging by a thread in the wake of the recent scandals. As Vanessa took her seat, her eyes roamed the crowded room, perhaps searching for a friendly face in a sea of judgment. And then it happened. Her gaze locked with Ethan's, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Recognition dawned in her eyes, followed quickly by shock, fear, and something else, a flicker of emotion Ethan could not quite name. Was it regret? Longing? Before he could process it, Vanessa's composure cracked entirely. Ethan. The name escaped her lips in a strangled gasp, loud enough to turn heads throughout the courtroom. Chaos erupted. Heads swiveled. Murmurs grew to a dull roar. And suddenly, all eyes were on Vanessa, and the nondescript clerk she was staring at with such emotion without anything. Daniel, who had been conferring with his lawyer, spun around, his face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. Judge Johnson banged his gavel frantically, calling for order, but his voice was lost in the commotion. Security guards began to move toward Ethan. But he was already in motion. With the skill of a man who had planned for every contingency, he slipped through the crowd, using the confusion to his advantage. As he made his way out of the main courtroom, Ethan's mind raced. This unexpected turn of events had forced his hand. But it also presented an opportunity. With security distracted and the entire courthouse in an uproar, he could make his final move. Slipping down a side corridor, Ethan made his way to Judge Johnson's chambers. And with steady hands, he prepared to deliver the final blow. A smirk played at the corners of Ethan's mouth. The chaos he had unleashed was serving its purpose, keeping attention focused on the courtroom while he made his escape. But he knew he was not in the clear yet. One wrong move, one observant guard, and everything could unravel. Meanwhile, back in the courtroom, Vanessa was being questioned by security personnel, her composed facade crumbling under the weight of the moment. Daniel stood nearby, his face a mask of fury and confusion, alternating between demanding answers from Vanessa and insisting to anyone who would listen that this had to be some kind of mistake. Judge Johnson, having gathered himself somewhat, returned to the bench. His attempts to restore order were half-hearted at best, his mind clearly elsewhere. The seeds of doubt Ethan had so carefully planted were now blooming into full-fledged paranoia. As Ethan finally reached the exit and slipped out into the afternoon sun, he allowed himself a moment to breathe. The adrenaline was still coursing through his veins, but a sense of accomplishment was beginning to set in. He had done it. He had faced his accusers, planted the evidence, and set in motion the final act of his elaborate plan. But Ethan knew this was far from over. The appearance of Ethan Sawyer in the courtroom would trigger a manhunt. His carefully constructed Alex Green identity would soon be compromised. He needed to move fast, to stay ahead of the storm he had unleashed. As he walked briskly away from the courthouse, blending into the crowd of pedestrians, Ethan's mind was already racing with his next moves. He had to contact Sarah, ensure she was safe and prepared for what was to come. He needed to reach out to Melissa Kong to make sure she connected the dots between Judge Johnson's corruption and the new evidence hidden in his chambers. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice wondered about Vanessa. The look in her eyes when she had recognized him, it had been so complex, so full of conflicting emotions. For a brief moment, Ethan allowed himself to remember the woman he had loved, the life they had shared. But he quickly pushed those thoughts aside. There was no room for sentiment or regret in what he had to do next. As the sun began to set over the city, casting long shadows across the streets, Ethan disappeared into the gathering darkness. Behind him, the courthouse continued to buzz with activity, the aftershocks of his appearance rippling outward. Judge Johnson, Daniel, Vanessa, they were all scrambling now, trying to make sense of what had happened and what it meant for their carefully constructed web of lies. But Ethan was already focused on the next phase of his plan. The courtroom showdown had been a crucial step. But it was only the beginning. The real battle was yet to come, and Ethan was more determined than ever to see it through to the end. Justice, true justice, was finally within his grasp, and he would not rest until the truth was revealed and his name was cleared. As night fell over the city, the stage was set for the final act of Ethan's daring plan. The pieces were in place, the players were in disarray, and the countdown to the ultimate reckoning had begun. The imposing offices of the State Bar Association stood silent in the early morning light, but inside, a storm was brewing. Daniel Reeves, once the golden boy of the prosecutor's office, now sat ashen-faced before a panel of his peers. The air was thick with tension as the committee chairman cleared his throat. Mr. Reeves, in light of the serious allegations of client fund mismanagement and ethical violations, this board has no choice but to suspend your license to practice law, effective immediately, pending a full investigation. Daniel's world tilted on its axis. He had known this was coming, had tried to prepare himself, but the reality of it was a gut punch. As he stumbled out of the building, his phone buzzed incessantly, reporters hungry for a statement, colleagues offering false sympathy. And Vanessa, her messages were growing increasingly frantic. Across town, in the bustling newsroom of WXDV, Vanessa Sawyer sat at her desk, her usual poise cracking under the weight of scrutiny from her colleagues. The whispers and sidelong glances were becoming unbearable. Her involvement in the Ethan Sawyer case, once a crowning achievement, now cast a long shadow over her career. As she attempted to focus on her latest assignment, a notification popped up on her computer screen, an email from an anonymous sender. The subject line made her blood run cold. A way out, limited time offer with trembling fingers. Vanessa opened the message. Miss Sawyer, your involvement in the corruption surrounding the Ethan Sawyer case has not gone unnoticed. However, an opportunity for redemption presents itself. Testify against Daniel Reeves and Judge Harold Johnson, and immunity from prosecution can be arranged. Time is of the essence. Your response is expected within 24 hours. Choose wisely. Vanessa's mind raced. Who could be behind this? Was it a trap? Or was this truly her last chance to salvage what remained of her life? As she contemplated her options, her phone lit up with a call from Daniel. Across the city, in a nondescript apartment that served as his base of operations, Ethan Sawyer watched multiple screens, each displaying a different aspect of his plan unfolding. He saw Daniel leaving the state bar in disgrace, Vanessa's reaction to the email he had carefully crafted, and live feeds from cameras he had strategically placed around the city. A soft knock at the door broke his concentration. Sarah Chun, his former paralegal and now his most trusted ally, entered the room. Her face was drawn with exhaustion, but her eyes sparkled with determination. "It's done," she said, placing a thick folder on the desk beside him. "I compiled everything we have on Judge Johnson's past cases. The pattern of bias and corruption is undeniable." Ethan nodded, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Excellent work, Sarah. This is the final piece we needed." As Sarah began to detail her findings, Ethan's attention was drawn back to one of the screens. Daniel had arrived at Vanessa's apartment building. His movements were erratic, his face contorted with rage. Inside, in her living room, Vanessa paced nervously, the anonymous email still open on her laptop. The sudden pounding on her door made her jump. "Vanessa, open up. I know you're in there." Daniel's voice, usually so smooth and controlled, was ragged with desperation. Against her better judgment, Vanessa opened the door. Daniel burst in, his eyes wild. "Did you do this?" he demanded, waving his phone in her face. "Did you sell me out to save yourself?" "Daniel, what are you talking about? I have not done anything." Vanessa's voice rose in pitch, fear and confusion evident in every word. "Don't lie to me." Daniel grabbed her arm roughly. "First the suspension, and now this email offering immunity? It has to be you." As their argument escalated, neither of them noticed the concerned neighbors peering out of their apartments. One of them was already dialing 911. Back in his command center, Ethan watched the scene unfold with a mix of satisfaction and unexpected emotion. Seeing Vanessa in distress stirred something in him, a memory of the woman he had once loved, before betrayal had poisoned everything. "Ethan," Sarah's voice broke through his reverie. "Are you sure about this? Once we submit this dossier, there is no going back." Ethan tore his eyes away from the screen, focusing on the task at hand. "I'm sure, Sarah. It is time for the truth to come out. All of it." As sirens wailed in the distance, approaching Vanessa's apartment, Ethan and Sarah began the final preparations for their endgame. The alliance that had destroyed Ethan's life was crumbling, each member turning on the others in a desperate bid for self-preservation. But Ethan knew the real test was yet to come. The final battle was about to begin. As Ethan reviewed the dossier one last time, he steeled himself for the confrontation that would either clear his name or condemn him forever. The pieces were in place, the players were primed, and the final act of this drama was about to unfold. The abandoned courthouse loomed against the darkening sky, its once grand facade now a crumbling testament to forgotten justice. Inside, dust motes danced in the fading light that filtered through boarded-up windows. Ethan Sawyer moved silently through the shadowy corridors, his footsteps echoing in the empty halls. He had chosen this location carefully, a symbolic arena for the reckoning that awaited. As he made his final preparations, checking the cameras and microphones hidden throughout the building, his mind raced with the possibilities of what was to come. Outside, 3 cars approached from different directions, their headlights cutting through the gathering dusk. Vanessa Sawyer, her usual composure shattered, gripped the steering wheel of her sleek sedan with white-knuckled intensity. Daniel Reeves, disheveled and wild-eyed, stumbled from a taxi, his gaze darting suspiciously into the shadows. And finally, Judge Harold Johnson, his imperious demeanor somewhat diminished, emerged from a nondescript town car. Each of them had received an anonymous message promising a way out of the scandal that threatened to consume them. Each believed they were meeting with a representative of the Attorney General's office, ready to cut a deal to save themselves. None of them knew the others were coming. As they entered the courthouse, oblivious to one another's presence, Ethan watched from a hidden vantage point. He could see the desperation etched on their faces, the fear that radiated from them in almost palpable waves. In a dusty, high-ceilinged room that had once served as a courtroom, 3 chairs stood arranged before a makeshift judge's bench. One by one, Vanessa, Daniel, and Judge Johnson were led into the room by Sarah, disguised as a legal aid. Their shock at seeing each other was evident. Before they could speak, the lights dimmed, and a figure emerged from the shadows behind the bench. Ethan Sawyer. His voice was calm, steady. You each came here tonight thinking you could cut a deal to save yourselves. But there will be no deals. No more lies. No more escape. Screens flickered to life around the room, displaying damning evidence. Corrupt transactions. Testimony from victims of Judge Johnson's biased rulings. Proof of Daniel's financial misconduct. With each revelation, the 3 conspirators seemed to shrink in their seats. You destroyed my life, Ethan continued, his voice tinged with the pain and anger he had held back for so long. You twisted the system I believed in, used it for your own selfish ends. And now, you will face the consequences. The screens shifted again, this time showing a live feed of their confrontation, broadcast to select members of law enforcement, the media, and the State Bar Association. The reaction was immediate. Daniel leaped to his feet, pointing a trembling, accusatory finger at Judge Johnson. He was the one who approached me, said he could guarantee convictions for the right price. Judge Johnson's face mottled with rage. You were all too happy to play along, Reeves. How many innocent people did you put away just to climb the ranks? Vanessa, tears streaking down her face, turned to Ethan. I never wanted to go this far. You have to believe me. They threatened me, said they would ruin my career if I did not testify against you. Ethan's face remained impassive. Save your excuses. The truth is out now, and you will all have plenty of time to reflect on your choices, where you're going. As if on cue, the distant wail of sirens filled the air, growing louder by the second. Panic set in. Daniel spun toward Ethan. Wait. I will tell you everything. Johnson was taking bribes for years. I have proof. Lies. Johnson bellowed. Reeves was the one embezzling from his clients. Vanessa, seeing her world crumble, finally broke. It's true, she sobbed. All of it. We thought we were untouchable. Ethan, I am so sorry. I never should have betrayed you. The police burst into the room. Ethan stood silently as his former tormentors were led away in handcuffs. The vindication he had sought for so long was finally his. But the victory felt hollow. The system he had once believed in had been exposed as deeply flawed, corrupted by the very people sworn to uphold it. Sarah appeared at his side, placing a comforting hand on his arm. It's over, Ethan. You did it. Ethan shook his head slowly. No, Sarah. This is just the beginning. There is so much work to be done to fix what is broken in our justice system, and I intend to see it through. As they walked out of the courthouse, leaving behind the echoes of shattered lives and broken oaths, Ethan knew his fight for true justice was far from over. But for the first time in years, he felt hope for the future. A future he was now free to shape. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, legal observers, and members of the public filled every available seat. At the center of it all sat Ethan Sawyer. His face was a mask of calm determination. This was the day he had fought for, dreamed of, feared might never come. The judge entered, calling the court to order. Ethan's eyes scanned the room, landing briefly on Sarah Chun seated in the front row. Her unwavering support had been his anchor through the storm, and the slight nod she gave him now filled him with renewed strength. The proceedings moved swiftly. With the mountain of new evidence, the confessions of Vanessa, Daniel, and Judge Johnson, the financial records, the testimony of other victims, Ethan's innocence was established beyond any doubt. The judge delivered her ruling. In light of the overwhelming evidence of Mr. Sawyer's innocence and the gross miscarriage of justice that occurred in his original trial, this court hereby exonerates Ethan Sawyer of all charges. Mr. Sawyer, on behalf of the justice system, We offer you our deepest apologies." The courtroom erupted in cheers and applause. Reporters rushed to break the news. Ethan remained still for a moment, letting the reality of his exoneration wash over him. He was free, truly free. In the days that followed, Ethan stood at a crossroads. He had been offered his old job back, with a promotion and a public apology. But as he stood in his former office, looking out over the city he had once served, he knew his path lay elsewhere. "I can't go back," he told Sarah over coffee. "Not after everything that has happened. The system is broken, Sarah, and I want to fix it." Sarah's eyes lit up with understanding. "What are you thinking?" Ethan leaned forward, his voice filled with passion. "I want to start a nonprofit, the Sawyer Justice Initiative. We will focus on overturning wrongful convictions, exposing corruption, and advocating for reform. There are so many people like me, Sarah. People who have been chewed up and spit out by a system that is supposed to protect them. They need someone to fight for them." Together, they began to plan. Over the next few months, the Sawyer Justice Initiative took shape. Ethan threw himself into the work, reviewing cases, meeting with lawmakers, raising awareness about the flaws in the legal system. Sarah was by his side every step of the way. One evening, after a successful fundraiser, Ethan took Sarah's hand. "I could not have done any of this without you." She smiled. "You don't have to thank me, Ethan. This fight for justice, it's as much mine as it is yours. We are in this together." As their lips met in a tender kiss, Ethan felt the last pieces of his new life fall into place. He had lost so much: his career, his marriage, years of his life. But he had gained something even more precious, a new purpose, a partner who shared his vision, and a chance to make a real difference. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan Sawyer looked toward the future. And he smiled. In America, the enthusiastic response from these aspiring legal professionals reminded Ethan of his own passion when he first entered law school a lifetime ago. As the applause died down, a sea of hands shot up for the Q&A session. Ethan fielded questions with candor and insight, drawing from his unique experiences on both sides of the justice system. One question in particular stood out. A young woman in the front row rose to her feet, her voice trembling slightly. "Mr. Sawyer, after everything you have been through, how do you maintain faith in the system? How do you not become cynical?" Ethan paused, considering his words carefully. "It is a fair question," he began. "There were times during my ordeal when I wanted to give up, to believe that the entire system was irredeemably corrupt. But that is not true. The system is made up of people like you, sitting in this room right now. Yes, there are those who abuse their power, but there are also countless individuals working tirelessly to uphold justice. Our job is to support and empower the latter while holding the former accountable." As the session wound down, Ethan noticed Sarah slipping into the back of the auditorium. Their eyes met, and a warm smile spread across his face. She had become more than just his partner in the Sawyer Justice Initiative. She was his partner in life. Her unwavering support and shared passion for justice deepened their bond with each passing day. After the talk, as they walked hand in hand across the campus, Sarah nudged him playfully. "So, how does it feel to be inspiring the next generation of legal eagles?" Ethan chuckled, squeezing her hand. "Surreal, to be honest. A year ago, I was behind bars. And now I am here, trying to make a difference." They stopped by a fountain, the same one where Ethan had sat as a student, dreaming of the impact he would make as a lawyer. Sarah turned to face him, her expression serious. "You are making a difference, Ethan. The initiative has already helped overturn 3 wrongful convictions, and our advocacy work is gaining traction in the state legislature. You should be proud." Ethan nodded, his throat tightening with emotion. "I am proud. Proud of the work we are doing, of how far we have come. But mostly, I am grateful. Grateful for this second chance, for the opportunity to right wrongs. And for you, Sarah. I could not have done any of this without you." As they shared a tender kiss, the setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and pink. For the first time in years, Ethan felt at peace. The road ahead would not be easy. There were still battles to be fought, injustices to be corrected, but with Sarah by his side and the Sawyer Justice Initiative as his platform, he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Later that evening, back in their shared office, Ethan sat at his computer one last time. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he prepared to execute the final step in erasing his digital footprints. This last piece of code would remove any remaining traces of his hacking activities, ensuring that his past methods could never be used to discredit his current work. As he hit enter, watching the progress bar slowly fill, Ethan reflected on his journey, the the pain, the betrayal, the years lost. All of it had led him here. He had taken the tools of his oppressors and used them to free himself. And now, he was letting them go, embracing a future built on transparency and legitimate change. The program completed its run. Ethan let out a long breath. It was done. His slate was truly clean. Sarah's voice called from the doorway. Ready to head home? Ethan smiled, shutting down his computer and standing up. More than ready. We have a big day tomorrow, that meeting with the state attorney general about reform proposals. As they left the office, arm in arm, Ethan took one last look around. The walls were lined with case files, each one representing a life they were fighting to change for the better. Framed news articles documented their successes, while a whiteboard was covered in plans for future initiatives. This was his life now. Not seeking vengeance, but striving for justice. Not tearing down a broken system, but working tirelessly to fix it from within. As they stepped out into the cool night air, Ethan felt a profound sense of purpose. The Sawyer Justice Initiative was more than just a nonprofit. It was a beacon of hope for those who had been wronged, a force for positive change in a system that desperately needed it. And for Ethan Sawyer, it was the culmination of a journey that had taken him from the depths of despair to the heights of redemption. With Sarah by his side and a clear mission ahead, he was ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring, armed with the unshakable belief that true justice was always worth fighting for. As they drove home through the city streets, Ethan's mind was already racing with ideas for their next project. The work was far from over. But for the first time in a long time, the path ahead was clear. And Ethan Sawyer was ready to walk it, one step at a time, toward a future where justice would prevail.